childhood nightmare. My mom's meltdown, dad's secret love, and the heartbreaking end I never saw coming. My father had an alcohol problem. It got so bad at the point when him and my mom would argue every day about him being drunk daily. Once my mom just had a serious breakdown and started busting all the windows in the house claiming she had no air and she needed space. Me and surprisingly, my sober father tried restraining her because she would probably injure herself in the broken glass. I don't know how she saw my father that night, but it was scary, felt like she was possessed or something. She just took off running around my little village. Me and my father tried looking for her. Keep in mind, I was just in the 4th grade at the time. We found her near a family-owned store that was closed and tried to bring her home. She just went nuts and got in an empty bottle, popped it, and threatened my father with the broken glass bottle. My father calmed her down, and finally we got her home. My father later called the police and an ambulance to get her help. He sent her to some type of mental hospital, thinking she would get better in some days. That night when they took my mom away, I was sad. My father had gotten drunk, and I went to sleep with him. We slept in the same bed, me and him, because even though he was always drunk, I loved my dad very much and couldn't sleep alone. That night was the first time I saw my father crying and blabbering about how much he loved my mom and how much he regrets being the person he is. I hugged him tight and started crying too. I woke up the next day, didn't go to school, because I had to help my father around the house to feed the animals and clean up in the house. I don't remember the next week, but my older sister came home from the UK to check on my mother and me. None of my 2 brothers and 2 sisters cared about my father. They just saw him as a drunk deadbeat. Even though he kept a job and he was almost running errands every day for money, about a month had passed and school finished. My mother had returned from that place she was in. She seemed normal, but I was scared of her at the time. My sister planned for her, my mom, and me to take a break and visit the UK with her so she could stay away from my dad. I think that was the main reason. Meanwhile, my brother came home from Germany to fix the broken windows around the house and to buy new ones. During that time in the UK, I got back closer with my mother. She felt a little bit off, but she was the same person I knew before. After a long 3 months, we returned home. And let me tell you, I was famished from the flight. And due to her not having money to buy me some food at the airport, and outside the airport being around 4 a.m., we just took a bus and went straight home. My father had made a veggie soup with shredded carrots, potatoes, some greenery, and believe it or not, rice in it. That was the first time my father cooked for me. That was the best meal I had ever tasted. I do not quite remember the flavors, but I ate like 3 bowls of that. Part of it because I was hungry, but I think I ate 3 bowls because it was delicious. I loved that meal. The best meal I have ever had. My father had passed away back in 2020 when I was 14. I regret every second of 2019 to 2020 because I had spent all that time playing video games with my friends. And he had a big lump sticking out of his ribs due to him having lung cancer. Fun fact, the cancer didn't kill him. A bacteria which he contacted in the hospital did. His last moments he was crying in pain at the hospital, and he asked the doctors to give him doses of morphine so he could pass away painlessly. The night I had returned from school, it was oddly quiet everywhere. When I entered the house, I saw my mother crying with a phone in her hand, and she told me, "Your father has died." I couldn't believe it. I was in a daze. I hugged my mother and said, "It is what it is." That night, I went on a game called Abzu and played it mindlessly 8 hours straight. I didn't even know what I was doing. I was just playing, couldn't think of anything. Just a void inside my head. When they brought him home to host a funeral, I saw his friend, a big guy about 140 kg, crying outside the room in which my father was in a casket. I did not cry that day. I was still playing video games with my friends. They didn't know what was going on at my place, but I was laughing and enjoying the online presence of my friends. Next day was my father's last day at home. I went inside the room alone, cried, and asked him, how could he leave me behind and why did he had to go? To this day, I still didn't visit his grave. In 2020, that was my last time crying. Now I am 18.